This precon is, hands down, one of the best precons Wizards has ever printed. World Shaper out of the box is a tight list and very cohesive, and represents a very interesting half pivot from what Jund normally does. The color pairing of Jund is no stranger to sacrifice themes, and is no stranger to landfall themes, but this is the first time that we have a deck Wizards has printed specifically around sacrificing lands and replaying those lands from the graveyard. I think it's incredibly interesting, incredibly tight, and plays incredibly well. Overall, this is an S-tier deck list. This is due in part to Hearthhall the World Seed, one of the new spacecraft artifact types at the lead of this deck. It gives us a win con in the command zone for sacrificing specifically lands. Don't get me wrong, it's still a 4-mana do-nothing artifact until you station it with 2 or more power. Then it gets an activated ability to sacrifice a land, draw 2 cards, and play an extra land. That means it completely negates any downside it creates by not putting you behind sacrificing lands. Very conscious design. But it's when you crew it at 8+ that it becomes your win con. Being a 6/7 flying Vigilance Haste is great, but dealing 2 damage to each opponent on land sacrifice is where you want to be. And that's because we can sacrifice a lot of lands very quickly, causing opponents to lose the game to unstoppable life loss before they really realize it. You may need 8 or more power worth of tapped creatures to get there, but once you get there, you're going to win. Now naturally, Hearthhall isn't the only new legend in the precon. We also have Zeraul Genesis Shepherd. If you want a more traditional creature commander, this is where you'll find it. Zeraul is a 5-mana 2/5 flyer. This insect druid, right off the bat, lets you play lands from your graveyard. That's a very valuable ability in this or any deck. But it's that second ability that really shines. Whenever you sacrifice another non-token permanent on your turn, you get to put counters equal to Zeraul's power on another creature, and it can trigger more than once each turn. While initially that's only 2 counters per sacrifice, you can put equipment on Zeraul or other counters on Zeraul to turn anything on your board into a massive monster. Both of these options are very solid at the lead of their own decks, and while there is overlap between them, I think it's largely because Zeraul lets you play lands from your graveyard. If it didn't give you the ability to replay a fetch land every turn, they'd be playing different games almost entirely. Which is why I want to keep Hearthhall at the lead of this deck. I think winning the game by sacrificing all of your lands, pulling them all back from the yard, then sacrificing them again is an awesome way to win without anyone really being able to stop you. And I mentioned at the top how tight this deck list is straight out of the box. They cram it with ways to sacrifice your own lands, from Braid's Cable Minion to Urg Spawn of Thurg to God Eternal Bontu. This deck gives you ways to sacrifice lands and always benefit from it. It's even got the Gitrog monster in the 99, which is just chef's kiss. I took one look at the commander and instantly had a list of cards I would want to add to this, and Gitrog was number 1 with a bullet. I was surprised that I wouldn't need to make that recommendation. And it should be said, as with most recent precons, this one contains an infinite combo thanks to the Gitrog monster. The inclusion of Dakmor Salvage in the 99 means you can mill your whole library with Gitrog, Dakmor, and 8 or more cards in hand. In cleanup, you discard down to 7, discarding Dakmor Salvage. You replace the draw trigger from Gitrog seeing Dakmor hit the yard with Dredge, returning Dakmor to your hand and milling 2. You're still in cleanup, so you still need to discard down again, resulting in a loop where you mill your entire library. As you mill cards with Dakmor, you draw more cards too, letting you shape and craft your hand to a perfect 7. Maybe containing an Aftermath Analyst, or a Splendid Reclamation, or a World Soul's Rage, all ways to pull all of the lands out of your graveyard all at once. Should we add them in? Well, no need, they are already in the deck list. This deck reads closer to a list that I would create around Hearthhall, rather than an actual precon. Not to mention bonkers reprints that fit perfectly here, like Oracle of Moldiah, Mazarek Crawl Death Priest, or freaking Corvold too. This is a 100% hands down all-timer of a precon. And I haven't even touched on some of the new cards made just for this precon, like the very fun Scouting Swarm. This is kind of like a Scoot Swarm, but in reverse. Sacrificing a land makes a copy of it if you have 7 or more lands in your yard, or just a 1/1 flyer otherwise. It's perfect in this brew as a crazy way to pop off, but also fits perfectly in decks like the Necrobloom, where you want to be milling and or sacrificing lands as well. Then there's Horizon Explorer as well, another addition to the likes of Tiller Engine and Spelunking as a 3-mana way to have your lands enter untapped, but also a way to create multiple of the new lander tokens each turn. The wording here, whenever you attack a player, means you can be getting 3 lander tokens each turn by attacking each opponent. And these lander tokens are basically rampant growths. This bad boy is all upside and I love him. Speaking of absolute bangers, I think Exploration Broodship is the best spacecraft they've printed. Sure, it's a 1-mana do-nothing, but once stationed at 3+, it's an exploration, which can easily happen on turns 2 or 3. But once stationed at 8+, it's a way to recast permanent spells from your graveyard at the cost of sacrificing a land, while also being a 4/4 flyer to boot. This is nutty good and goes in so many decks. Also very welcome new cards that may be missed are Vernal Fen and Festering Thicket, the new green-black additions to the Tango land and Cycling land cycles respectively. They're lands, so a lot of folks might overlook them, but they're non-basic lands with basic land types, making them very good despite entering tapped more often than not. Enough gushing about the box list. How would I improve the deck? Let's look at upgrading this brew, and it is incredibly hard, since what we're removing and replacing is basically just for better redundancies. There are very few cards that I'd remove just because they aren't good. But I would remove Pest Infestation for being not great. The deck kind of wants to be big mana with a few X spells in the list, but I really don't think this is where it's at. I've been in favor of cutting Pest Infestation from every list I've ever seen it in, because the double X casting cost is just so hefty for so minimal benefit. Maybe in a token-centric deck, but even then I find that it's card 101 in any list, which is also the reason why I want to cut Gaze of Granite. For a board wipe, it's expensive, and while it is shapeable, it's also a huge mana sink. The deck's mana curve is at just a hair over 3 by default, so if you're casting this for 2 or 3 paying 5 or 6 mana, chances are you're destroying half of your own things too. Not cool in a game where you really want to win by attrition. Then there's Binding the Old Gods. This is an out-of-place Saga reprint in the deck, not doing a lot apart from being removal and ramp on a single card. It's slow and expensive, and we can really do a lot better. There are other cards in the list that already do better after all. Beyond this, I want to cut down the lands. The default list has 42 lands in it, which, even for a land-based deck, is overkill. Trimming it down to an even 40 is preferred, and my first cut is Myriad Landscape. The deck has 16 basic lands in the list, and yes, this is a land that sacrifices itself, but I've talked at length about why this is not a good card. I could see a corner case for it here, but it's the worst of the deck's lands. I also want to cut the only wastes in the deck. It's in here for a clear purpose, as there's only one card with a necessary colorless mana cost, but I'm cutting it too, so this can go in the trash with it. And the card that needs the waste is Worldbreaker, a very expensive body plus removal spell that recurs with a colorless cost, and yes, sacrificing a land. However, if we're looking at ways to sacrifice lands, this is the most expensive and least beneficial. It's a 10 mana and 1 land total to recur this from the yard and recast it, which, well, we should be winning if we have that many resources at our disposal. Now, the rest of these cuts were difficult. I know why they're in the deck, but I think we can do better, starting with Tear Asunder, a simple removal spell, exiling an artifact or enchantment for 2 mana, pretty basic. And for 4 mana kicked, it can exile any non-land permanent. Pretty decent. But it's just a removal spell in a deck packed with other removal spells like Infernal Grasp and Windgrace's Judgment. It's the lowest tier of removal in this tight deck list, so it gets cut. And I also know exactly why Loamcrafter Fawn is in the deck, allowing us to ditch a mitt full of lands and recur cards from our yard. It's not bad. Really, it does everything we want it to do, but it's a 3 mana creature you likely aren't going to be casting until turns 5 or 6 or more. There are definitely situations where you cast it on turn 3, pitch 4 lands from your hand, then next turn cast a Splendid Reclamation. But we can craft that scenario with much better and more beneficial circumstances. And while Augur of Autumn is a good card usually, it's also outclassed by Oracle of Moldiah, also reprinted in this list. Hell, I'd prefer a Courser of Crewfix over an Augur of Autumn in this deck, and I didn't even include that in my upgrades. I think it's a fine card, but in a deck full of great cards, it's just not needed. Finally, my last cut, painfully, is Angry Omnath. Locus of Rage has a purpose in this list, creating big angry elementals on landfall, and also dealing damage when they die. He's really good, but he's also 7 mana, and when we're looking for cuts to tighten the deck up, trimming from the top is the way to do it. With no reanimation, we can't cheat him out, and while we are ramping, I don't think we're doing it to get Omnath out faster out of all of the cards in the deck. Now, what are we replacing them with? I'm going to give 2 sets of recommendations for upgrades, the efficient upgrades and the expensive upgrades, so stay with me here. For the efficient upgrades, I want to make it more consistent to sacrifice lands on demand and bring them all back whenever we want. Ideally, this lets us create explosions of life loss with a fully stationed Hearth Hull to close out the game. So I want to include cards like Sylvan Safekeeper. The efficient 1-mana elf lets us sacrifice lands on demand to give a creature we control Shroud. This also lets us dodge targeted removal very effectively, triggers Hearth Hull, and puts lands into the graveyard whenever we want. Along those same lines is classic Zuran Orb, a 0-mana artifact that lets us sacrifice lands on demand for 2 life each. Not only can it be used in an emergency to gain life, but it can trigger Hearth Hull over and over again. A perfect include. Walk-in Closet, Conduit of Worlds, and Ramanap Excavator are other ways to let us play lands from the graveyard, which is a bonus when we can play a Triome Fetch from the yard or an Evolving Wilds from the yard to get multiple landfall triggers and land sacrifices each turn, while ensuring we're not wasting resources by sacrificing important lands. Undergrowth Recon is another excellent addition too, acting like another landfall from the graveyard each turn for free. This doesn't count as our land play for turn unlike our previous options, but also ensures we never run out of lands in play, a serious issue in a deck that seeks to remove its own resources so frequently. And if we want to be bringing all lands back from the graveyard in addition to Aftermath Analyst and Splendid Reclamation, we can include Summon Titan from the Final Fantasy set and World Shaper, which I'm just realizing is this deck's whole namesake, but isn't in the default list. Both give us more ways to mass revive lands so that we can repeatedly sacrifice them without loss, draining opponents repeatedly and closing out the game. It's this redundancy that makes us consistent. Lastly, I want to make sure we include a few more cheaper landfall effects. I really like Sabotender from the Final Fantasy set here, as we can toss around extra damage when we play lands repeatedly, revive lands repeatedly, and fetch lands repeatedly. Each landfall is basically half of a trigger from a fully crewed Hearth Hull, and in tandem they can end games very quickly. And I want to include the new Use Social Engineering from the main Edge of Eternity set. It's a landfall token creator along the same lines as Zendikar's Royal and Chocobo Racetrack, but it has the new Warp ability for 2 mana. So you can warp it out on a turn where you're mass reviving lands for a burst of creature tokens, rather than needing to cast it for the full 5 mana first. You can cast it later for that full 5 mana, for sure, but this way is very efficient. If you're dropping some real money on this deck for upgrades, here are some much more expensive options you could include, like Squandered Resources, a 2 mana enchantment that makes mana for sacrificing lands on demand. It's exactly what this deck wants to be doing and is a great fit, but will currently run you over $50 for a copy. It only has 1 printing ever, so copies are rare. And with Exploration Broodship printed in this deck, a regular old Exploration would be a good add too. Extra land drops, coupled with any of the myriad of ways to play lands from your graveyard, are fantastic synergies for all of the deck's many triggers. But even with multiple reprints, this 1 mana enchantment will still set you back over $20 right now. I also think Scapeshift would be right at home in this deck, allowing for mass land sacrifice and mass landfall triggers. But since it sees play in Modern, it's also a $50 card and will continue to be exactly that expensive for a very long time. Classic artifacts like Crucible of Worlds and Amulet of Vigor would be right at home in this list as well, but both are around $30 right now. They do what we want them to do, but there are less expensive options. These are certainly the way to go if you have copies in your deck boxes. I mentioned Tiller Engine earlier, and a lot of folks have snatched up copies ahead of this deck's release, driving its cost to $15. but it is a good option to include if you can grab one. But on that same note, a Spelunking is just $3 and does the same thing. Food for thought when making upgrades. And if we're looking at curved toppers, Famished Worldsire is much more in line with what we're trying to do. This mythic from the main Edge of Eternity set is exactly what we want to do, sacrificing and replacing lands. But it's at the $20 mark right now for pre-orders and certainly isn't going in everyone's list unless you open one at the pre-release. There are plenty of other includes possible in the deck, like Wayward Swordtooth to allow for extra land drops, Lumra to allow for more ways to mass reanimate lands, and Ob Nixilis the Fallen for more landfall triggers that can win you the game. But again, this deck is really tight as it is. I recommend playing with it out of the box a bunch, finding out what you feel worked or didn't work, and tweaking and tuning accordingly. Let me know what you think about the World Shaper Precon in the comments below. What did you add or remove, and what are you planning on upgrading? You can find all of my changes linked below at my sponsor, MOXFIELD. Be sure to check out the deck history section for full info on what was added or removed. MOXFIELD is the best deck building platform in the world and makes it easy to build decks and search for specific cards with their powerful tools. Be sure to check out my brews on my profile today. If you want to pick up any singles whatsoever, go to Card Trader. Use my promo code MECHANIC right now to get 5% off your order from any TCG. Card Trader's Zero system means you can get cards from all over the world with only one shipping fee. Save money and time today. If you're looking to sell off your Magic cards, go to Card Conduit. They are hands down the easiest way to sell your individual cards, without the hassle of traditional buy listing. They'll give you top dollar while handling all of the heavy lifting, from sorting to grading to optimizing your price across a huge network of vendors, and they'll give you cold hard cash for it. You can use the promo code MECHANIC right now for 10% off of all fees. If you were inspired to brew today, you have to hit that subscribe button. Check out this other brew on my channel now for more sweet deck techs. And as always folks, good luck and have fun.